Thank you, Josh. The IJS community has been so amazing to me, always, but especially during this time of the 30-day mourning period that I'm in following the passing of my mom, Nancy Dumont Thompson. So thank you for acknowledging that and grateful for this community. So in our Torah reading cycle that we have each year, we find ourselves in the book of Genesis, in the Torah portion known as Vayeshev. And Vayeshev has, the word itself has an especial meaning for mindfulness. It literally means, we're talking about Jacob at the beginning of the Torah portion, Vayeshev. Jacob dwelled, Jacob sat, Jacob, we could drash that in any different ways we wanted to, meaning to kind of be in a place to sit or to live. So the verb there, lashev, also has the same letters as lashuv, which means to turn, which is also the word that is the basis for tshuva, the process that we engage in, not only during the High Holy Day period, but really on a daily basis of what does it mean to turn toward, to turn back to something. Our attention wanders, our behavior wanders, and we have this opportunity literally minute by minute to renew, to return, and to turn. So, interesting commentary found in rabbinic literature in a piece called the Midrash Michtav Yad. And Rabbi Elazar asks the question, is there another way to translate Vayeshev other than he dwelled or he sat? And he suggests that we make this verb into a reflexive verb, v'hit yashev, which would mean that Jacob was settled. Jacob was, his mind was settled, right? So not just a physical settling, but a settling that's happening in the level of Jacob's mind and Jacob's soul. So with that, I want to turn to another section of our parsha, but that's an important backdrop because we're going to talk about that settling of the mind and the soul. And ask and thank Rachel for sharing the text sheet today. And I'll be reading all these sources. So if you don't have the ability to look at this, not to worry, I'll be happy to read those sources. So going to another section of our Torah portion about the Joseph story. And we have this section of the long story of Joseph, which goes over several of our Torah portions. And we read in chapter 39, after a time, Joseph's master's wife, her name also known as Potiphar, cast her eyes upon Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused. He said to his master's wife, "Look, my master has withheld nothing from me except yourself, since you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God?" And as much as she coaxed Joseph day after day, he did not yield to her request to lie beside her, to be with her. So the key question that I want to pick up on in this, inspired by my great teacher, Rabbi Sam Feinsmith from the Institute here. I'm currently enrolled in his class on the weekly Torah portion, featuring teachings from Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav. So I credit him with this, lifting up this question. When Joseph says, "How then could I do this great evil and sin against God?" Right? Kind of this internal question that Joseph raises to himself in the middle of this moment, fraught with all kinds of different danger and emotions. He pauses and he asks himself this question. And it raises for us, when we are in the throes of desire. Now, I'm not going to say that Joseph was necessarily desiring Potiphar per se. That's one interpretation that we could surmise from this. But it does raise the question for us of what happens when we are in the throes of something we really, really want? And how do we ascertain if that is wholesome, if it is good for us, something we should pursue? And how do we ascertain when it is something that is not wholesome and we need to stop and ask ourselves, what do I do now? What are my choices before me in this moment? And so here I quote from Rabbi Sam, who is addressing in his commentary on Rabbi Nachman's commentary here about a very valuable concept that also ties back into the name of our Torah portion. And here I'll read a direct quote from Sam. As Rabbi Nachman taught, we begin this work of how to counteract the distortion of desire, by cultivating Yishuv Da'at, finding the space between stimulus and reaction. I'm going to pause here in my quote to just point out that Yishuv Hada'at, the first word there, Yishuv, is the same root as Vayeshev at the beginning of the name of our Torah portion, as I pointed out. Okay, this settling of the mind, finding the space between stimulus and reaction. I'm resuming the quote from Sam here, allowing the mind to settle enough to regain clarity and composure. When the mind is thus settled, we can more readily consider the long-term effects of feeling unwholesome desire and recognize that obtaining worldly objects rarely brings lasting happiness, contentment, or well-being. We may observe, for instance, that when we finally obtain the object of our desire, the satisfaction is often fleeting, minutes or hours at most. Before long, the mind becomes restless again, reaching for the next hit. Desire gives rise to craving, craving to temporary fulfillment, fulfillment to renewed dissatisfaction. And we find ourselves caught in a loop that never truly nourishes us. Again, words from Rabbi Sam Feinsmith from the IJS course, Awareness in All Things. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav teaching on the weekly Torah portion. Thank you, Rachel. You can take the source sheet down. So here embedded in these, not only in the name of our parasha, but also in Joseph's stopping in a moment, we have lifted up this concept of Yishuv Hada'at. How do we settle our minds? And this is exactly what we're here to do today in this space, and what we do every time we pause and we stop. We have the opportunity for renewed Yishuv Hada'at, to reconnect with what it means to feel a sense of being centered and settled. Now, some of us may have come into this sit today feeling that, no problem. So you're just going to continue right in that flow as we find our seats. And for others of us, we're coming in with not being able to connect, perhaps, to that sense of Yishuv Hada'at, a sense that there's a lot of things that we want that maybe we're not getting. And struggling with all kinds of different desires. In this case, in Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav's commentary and Sam's interpretation of it, we're talking about unwholesome things, things that if we pause and stop and reflect, we can acknowledge that is not good for me. That is not good for the world if I make that choice. But we can also apply this to things that might be very wholesome for us to receive, but yet are still out of our reach. And what does it mean when we can't get what we want? Basically, to quote a famous song, you can't always get what you want. So with that, I invite you to find your seat, and we will, or if you're lying down, wherever there's contact between your body and another surface, and to anchor ourselves in our breath And if that's not available to you for whatever reason, you might be in pain. When you connect with your breath deeply, I invite you to have another grounding focus. Maybe it's the touch of your hands on your legs. Maybe it's a visual focus or an awareness of some other internal part of your body that you can connect with. And we'll sit in quiet for the next 12 minutes or so, and I'll bring us back together before the mourner's Kaddish. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Yai, dai, 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 dai. Lai, dai, 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 dai. Yai, dai, 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 dai. Yai, dai, 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 dai. Yai, dai, 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 dai.
Thank you so much, Susan, for that teaching and for guiding us in our practice today. We will have a chance now for those who are remembering loved ones to say Kaddish. If you want in the chat to include the name of anybody you're remembering today, you can do so. And if you'd like to join me, you can unmute. Rachel will put the text of Kaddish up on our screen here. Thank you. All right. And so if you're if you're reciting Kaddish and want to unmute and join me, you are welcome to do so. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah le'alma divrah chirutei v'yamlich malchutei chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei b'chol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam v'la'alamei amen.
Yitbarach,
Yishtabach v'har v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. Yithadar v'yit'ale v'yithalal shmei tekudsha brichu la'ela mikol birchata v'shirata ushbechata v'nechemata da'iran v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabba Shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'ol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mroma hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei teva.
Ve'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Right. Thank you. We invite you to stick around now for conversation and reflection about the practice. If you need to leave us, we wish you tzeitzchem l'shalom, farewell, and hope you'll be back with us soon. And if you have a question, we invite you to put it in the chat with all caps question beforehand. It just helps us to see it. And you're welcome, of course, to respond to one another. Just please remember to observe our general intentions here around mindful speech, and a helpful reminder is no fixing, advising, saving, or correcting is often a useful way to think about it. So, all right. So, Susan, thank you so much for offering that teaching. And I'm drawn to the idea you talked about, Yishuv Hadat, and that, which has many ways we could sort of understand and translate that: a settled mind, a mind that is creating. You talked about creating the space between stimulus and response. Right. And that piece from Rabbi Nachman that sort of elaborated on that, of the invitation to think about, how we can bring more of that awareness to our lives, right? Just that are always so hyper stimulated, I think, these days for many of us. So yeah, and I just invite you to, reflect on if for yourself, and, as you're, and maybe you mentioned at this time, as you're approaching Shloshim for your mother, how your practice has been supportive for you. I wonder, in the sense of Yishuv Hadad, it can be such a difficult time, and I know there've been other things going on as well. And so, yeah, I wonder if there's any personal insight you want to share on that.
Mm.
wondering about.
Thank you, Josh. I'm struck today by, as Josh mentioned, there's a lot going on in my life. So I've also been deep into caregiving for another member of my family who's very ill and in a different geographic location. So it's been interesting when I'm in one physical place, like missing the other physical place where I'm not, right? And then I just came home Sunday night. And now I miss being with my mother-in-law in Southern California in her final days. So it's interesting when I see that, I kind of said to myself this morning, oh, everybody is right where they're supposed to be right now. Like I'm supposed to be here right now. Here are the things in front of me to focus me and to give me that sense of Yishuv dot. And there are other people who are right where they need to be right now. And that's really hard to do because that voice, right, creeps in. It's like, no, but I really want that. I really want that over there. So that's kind of a mantra, I think, this morning that I woke up with. Like, I'm right where I need to be, and other people are where they need to be. That may not be everyone's truth, but I think today that is how it's manifesting and making me fill the space with presence here instead of being somewhere else, which a part of my heart is, but most of myself is here in this moment. And I'm
Mhm.
grateful for that.
Beautiful. To me, that sort of points up some of the connection between, this lashuv, lashevet, Shabbat, right? Also, Shabbat is this time of like practicing. Yeah, you just kind of get accept that like you're in the place where you're supposed to be, like and then it's
Mhm.
you can't make it otherwise, right? I'm gonna accept that. Okay, here I am, and so hineni, this is where I am, and I'm gonna live my life that this is where I need to be at the moment, right? I'm trying to align those two, so it's really interesting. Yeah. There's a question I see here from Susan Rubenstein that says asking more about this word, right? The reflexive lahit yashev that you quoted from the Midrash. Um, is it too much of a leap to imagine? I think Jacob. I think it's Joseph in this case meditating. Uh, I I would say no, but but go ahead.
I think it's not too much of a leap. And Susan, thank you for raising that. And you're both, as far as I can see, both are true. So the original commentary shared was in regard to Jacob at the beginning. And I think
Yeah,
it also could be raised in the throes of this moment with Potiphar.
chosen. Right.
So both, that's the whole point is that what does it mean to stop? And also, and Josh, thank you so much for raising Shabbat, because one of the things I always need to remind myself, and I find that many of us aren't familiar with, is that Shabbat means to stop. Lishbot, right? That's what Shabbat is, a cessation more than
Hmm.
anything. And so, yeah, and so whether we're stopping for Shabbat or we're stopping in the throes of a moment of desire or we're stopping as Jacob was, you know, and not stopping, but still heart being somewhere else, right? But being here. And so for me, mindfulness and meditation flow right into that because when we stop, that's what has the opportunity to fill us. A period of discernment, of emptying, discernment, but the stopping is the most important part,
Hmm.
I think.
Yeah, I think there's also an invitation to like just also remember that meditating doesn't have to always look like this, right? Sitting with your eyes closed, and like there are many ways to be meditative and to move through the world. Even I was doing a Peloton ride this morning, and um, the amazing thing about having a stationary bike is that you can close your eyes. And so there was a 3-minute interval, which was a reasonably hard level. And I decided I really wanted to do it all eyes closed and just sort of and it's really interesting what happens, when you're taking away that piece of stimulus and just like feeling the things that opens up the sight, as it were, that it opens up internally, and feeling all of that is a way to be, it's about ultimately being present, I think with what's going on, and feeling that and being aware of it. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's beautiful. It also, what's else, the other thing that I find interesting is I'm thinking of um, Rashi on that first word on Vayeshev, I'm pretty
Mm.
sure, says uh, it's actually a tragic thing because it's ironic, right? Here, Jacob has been, he finally is settled for like 1 minute in his life, and he like gets like 30 seconds of it, and then he loses a son, um, and that it's almost an ironic comment, and there's a certain challenge that's posed to that of like, when do those moments happen for us? And some of us, have really living through really difficult circumstances. Being able to find a sense of quiet and alignment, even amidst all of that, I know I've heard, certainly from people for whom that's been a struggle, that it's been really, especially powerful, to be able to do that in the midst of a lot of travail. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's our Hasidic teachers also teach us that prayer and our meditation can be the way we move through life, right? And that's the moment on the Peloton, the 3-minute interval on the Peloton, right? So there can be a sense of as you're moving through caregiving or even, being in the grocery store, right? That our goal is to have those things be as much as one as possible, right? How can my walk through the grocery store be an act of prayer or awareness? Um, and so, yeah, it's not always about sitting per se. Although that's a place to practice so that when we go into the grocery store, into the caregiving roles, we can have that sense of expansiveness as much as we can.
yeah. Um, I want to just acknowledge Marcy's comment here, as a first time participant, and we're just so glad and thank you for your openness and your honesty there. It's really, I'm so glad that the space can be here for you,
Mm.
and hope you might come again. So, and Wounds into Wisdom is an incredible book by Tirsa Firestone. In fact, she taught a course for us on that on the book last year. Yeah, so glad you're reading that. I want to
Mm.
not. I also want to. I want to pick up. Racheli had a question above. How can I stop myself from responding to my fellow Jews who are swift to show how prejudiced they are? And she gives an example here. But yeah, just invite, thinking about response there about story of Joseph is also in many ways that first chapter is certainly a story not about Joseph, but about his brothers who we refer to as the Shvatim, right? This is the people of Israel, and look how they're treating each other. Um, yeah, I wonder if you want to respond to that.
Yes, I am thinking, and Josh, maybe you can remind me, there is an acronym called RAIN,
Yeah.
RAIN. I'm blanking on this shows I need to practice it more. I'm blanking on what the letters stand for, but it is a process, I think, of being able to stop and reflect
Mhm.
um, when one is in the moment. And so, Racheli, I feel for you in this example that you talked about that when you're exposed to prejudice, especially within our community, um, you know, you asked how you could stop yourself from responding, and it's a good question. I'm not going to provide an answer because the answer might be different for everyone, but I do think that the stopping is an important thing to incorporate in because so much of the times we rush to respond, or as Josh reminded us in the IJS ethos earlier, we step in to try to fix, rectify, and part of the stopping is to discern what our role is and what is within our power to affect. And that's a big question in these individual interactions.
Yeah. Um, the acronym, just Google, recognize, acknowledge, investigate, and non-identify, or that has become nurture. But the original idea being to create some distance, some space of non-identification, saying like, these are my feelings, I am not my feelings, right? And recognize them. Um, uh, it's also interesting. I haven't thought about this. I'm thinking out loud, but recognition also comes up in this parsha significantly, right?
Mm.
That Joseph, that the brothers bring Joseph's coat to Jacob and say, "Hakerna," right? Recognize? Do you recognize this coat? Basically, which is when you read it slowly, it's just such a horrible story. But anyway, do you recognize this? And then in the next chapter, when we have the story of Jacob or Yehuda and Tamar, rather, that's also about recognition, right? Ultimately, and so it's interesting that there's a theme here of recognition somehow is coming up. The accept, investigate, and unidentify a little less so. I think
Okay.
we don't necessarily models of that in this parsha so much, um, but I think the practice that you're talking about, and how we can do that, and also, I just also remember I think about. There are ways that we can also choose. Do we want to have a judgmental response? Could we have a response that is compassionate, that's maybe pitying a little bit, that like, wow, how much pain does a person have to be in to like make that kind of a choice, perhaps, which is hard to do. And it's not necessarily appropriate in all settings, but there are invitations for you know, um, how we might want to respond. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
okay, just reading, getting caught up
Yeah, to
here.
see if there's any other questions as well. There's a comment from Roberta.
Hmm.
Should we read that out? You want me to read it
Yeah,
out loud?
go ahead. Yeah,
So
sure.
Roberta says, I'm thinking that there's a difference between lashevet, which is the Hebrew word for to sit or to dwell, and lahit yashev, to be settled or to settle yourself. The latter, reflexive, requires more intention to sit myself down. It takes that extra bit of effort to stop, to acknowledge all that is in the present moment with both expansiveness and boundaries, self-compare, care and compassion. Wow.
Beautiful.
Yeah. You add those two extra Hebrew letters, the hey and the taf, and then you get that kind of, okay, I'm going to have to do
Mm,
this, right? I'm going to have um, to take this action. So it's beautiful. Thank you for lifting that up.
yeah, yeah, that's really good.
Mm.
Thank you. Um,
Susan
okay.
raised some Viktor Frankl. Wow, that's
Viktor
beautiful.
Frankl often makes it in here. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a regular visitor here. There's
He is.
one more question that I saw here. Are there any Torah examples where there is not the ability to pause and that's recognized as true? Asking because of recent neuroscience research that under certain prolonged stress, brain changes make this not possible biologically. Um,
Wow.
yeah. Uh, um, Certainly, I mean, what do I want to say here? Um, yeah, there are certainly instinctive responses, I think, that, we have and that we recognize. Um,
Well, and also
eh,
that are virtuous, like lahashkem
mhm,
baboker, right? Like to get
right.
up early in the morning. So I think there are times when being in touch with our body creates a good flow
Hmm.
where we don't stop in the deliberating stage, but we flow from the body. I don't know, that was one example that
Hmm.
came to mind for me. Sorry, I didn't translate, or that we have this sense of when Abraham gets up early in the morning to do a mitzvah, and this is translated in other places in our tradition, that kind of
Yeah.
getting out of bed a little sleepy, but moving toward the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And developing sort of virtuous habits, right? That so much of our tradition is trying to help us do. So. All right,
Thank,
I think that's a place where we're gonna stop in the
mm,
interest of time. Thank you everybody for being here, for your questions and conversation in the chat. Thank you, Susan, for your
thank you,
teaching,
Josh.
and thank you to Rachel for being on our tech today. We will be back here tomorrow, same time and channel. And until then, wish you well. And
Mm,
yeah, thank you, everybody. Okay.
thank you.